Keanu Reeves saw a nurse sleeping at a bus stop in the pouring rain, soaked, exhausted, and clutching her purse like her life depended on it. Most would have kept driving. But what Keanu did next uncovered a secret that would shake the entire medical world, and it all started with a single, silent glance through the glass. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The rain was coming down hard that night in Los Angeles, the kind of cold, relentless downpour that blurred the streetlights and turned the sidewalks into mirrors. Keanu Reeves gripped the handlebars of his motorcycle as he navigated the nearly empty streets. The ride home after a long night of filming should have brought him peace. But tonight he felt different. His back ached from the 12-hour shoot, and his mind was still buzzing from the emotional scenes he'd just wrapped. He didn't speak much on set, but the work had taken something out of him. He was looking forward to a shower and a silent apartment. Downtown LA was quieter than usual, the rain keeping even the late-night wanderers indoors. His vintage black Norton Commando glided through the wet roads, its engine humming low. The wind was cold under his jacket. He kept his eyes on the road, barely thinking, just riding. That was when he passed the corner of Glendale Boulevard and he was about to take the turn towards Silver Lake when something made him slow down. It wasn't movement, it was stillness. Under the dim yellow light of a bus stop, he saw someone sitting motionless on the bench, hunched forward, soaked from the rain. As he got closer, he realized it was a woman in light blue scrubs. Her shoes were worn, the soles nearly coming apart. Her long, dark hair was pulled back into a bun that had half fallen loose. One hand clutched a faded leather purse tightly against her chest, the other resting limply at her side. She wasn't just sitting, she was sleeping. Sleeping at a bus stop, in the rain. At nearly 3 a.m., Keanu eased off the throttle and coasted to the curb across from the stop. His headlight lit up the bench and the figure on it. The rain fell in sheets, cascading off the edge of the awning above her. She wasn't moving, just sitting there, as if she had nothing else in the world. A pang hit his chest. He killed the engine and pulled off his helmet. The silence was immediate, except for the soft tapping of rain on concrete and metal. He sat there for a long moment, staring at the woman across the street, trying to understand what he was seeing. Nurses didn't sleep at bus stops, not unless something had gone terribly wrong. Then he saw her name tag. It caught the light for just a second. Rosa Delgado. The tag was pinned just above a small enamel pin in the shape of a heart with angel wings. He'd seen those before. Nurses in children's hospitals wore them. His niece had been in pediatric care for a month once, and he remembered the gentle hands of women who wore pins just like that. Keanu blinked rain from his eyes and stayed there, unmoving, unsure of what to do. This wasn't a stranger asking for help. This was something else. She stirred beneath the bus stop's narrow roof. Slowly, her shoulders shifted. Her head lifted from the metal wall behind her. Her eyes opened. For a moment, they locked eyes through the rain. Keanu didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He simply watched her. And what he saw wasn't embarrassment or fear. It wasn't desperation. It was strength. Quiet, exhausted strength. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. Eyes that said, "Yes, I'm sitting here in the rain. Yes, I'm wearing scrubs because I just finished a shift taking care of other people's children. Yes, I have nowhere else to go tonight. But I'm not broken." Then, just as calmly, she turned her head back and closed her eyes again, pulling her purse even closer. The rain kept falling. The street light above flickered. No one else was on the street. No cars, no pedestrians, nothing but the two of them, separated by a silent stretch of rain and concrete. Keanu sat frozen. A nurse, a pediatric nurse, sleeping at a bus stop after midnight. Something about that wouldn't let him look away. This city was filled with people who struggled. He'd seen homelessness in every form, but this wasn't the same. Her uniform was clean, her name tag was polished. She had dignity. It radiated from her, even soaking wet, even curled up on a hard bench. And that's what hurt the most. He looked up at the digital clock on his bike. 2:48. Ay, ma'am. The next bus wouldn't arrive for another hour or more, and even then, where would she go? A couch? A shelter? A borrowed corner in someone else's world? He didn't know. But he knew what he saw. That kind of exhaustion didn't come from laziness. It came from giving everything you had to everyone else and saving nothing for yourself. Keanu started the bike again. The engine rumbled to life, breaking the stillness. Rosa didn't move. He rode away slowly, his heart heavy, casting one last glance in the mirror. She was still there. Still seated, still silent. Back in the hills above the city, Keanu pulled into his driveway and sat on the idling bike long after the gate closed behind him. He stared into the dark. The image wouldn't leave his mind. Those eyes, the angel wingpin, the rain in her hair. He turned off the engine, went inside, but didn't sleep. Hours passed. He sat at his kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold. Around 5 a.m., he opened his laptop. He typed in the words, St. Joseph's Hospital, Pediatric Wing, Los Angeles. Her name had been Rosa Delgado. He didn't know why, but he needed to find out who she really was. The hospital website loaded slowly. It was basic, outdated, not much more than a few pages with smiling stock photos and donation links. But under the Staff tab, he found her. And Rosa Delgado, RN, Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. 12 years of service. Her picture was small, taken years ago. She looked younger, more rested, but the eyes were the same, focused, kind, steady. Keanu leaned closer to the screen. There wasn't much information, no bio, no awards, just a name and department. But it confirmed what he already knew. She wasn't new. She wasn't lost. She was committed. He searched her name again, this time more broadly. Buried deep in the results was an article from a small medical journal. Co-authored by R. Delgado, RN, on pediatric neurological complications. The article was technical, dense, but it had a spark. It wasn't written like a nurse ticking off boxes. It was written by someone who cared deeply and had done their homework. Someone who had seen children slipping away and couldn't accept the system's answers. He kept scrolling. Then he found something else. A public obituary from 3 years ago. Sofia Delgado, age 8, passed away after a long battle with a rare neurological disorder. The parents were listed as Rosa Delgado and Carlos Herrera. Keanu stopped. 8 years old. That explained the pin. That explained the storm behind Rosa's eyes. He didn't know why it hit him so hard. Maybe because he had nieces and nephews. Maybe because he remembered his mother crying over hospital bills when his sister was sick. Or maybe it was just because it was 3 in the morning and he was thinking too much. He closed the laptop and sat back. The rain was still tapping gently against the windows. He could have gone to bed. He could have forgotten the whole thing. But he didn't. Instead, he walked over to the window, looked out at the dark city stretching below, and whispered one quiet promise to himself. I'm going to find out more. She deserves that much. He didn't know what he was getting into. He didn't know that Rosa's life was much more complicated than he could imagine. He didn't know that the pin on her chest represented not just grief, but a silent revolution against everything broken in the system she worked in. All he knew was that for the first time in a long while, something had reached past the fame, past the cameras, past the career, and shaken him awake. A nurse asleep in the rain had become the most unforgettable moment of his year. And somehow, Keanu Reeves knew this was only the beginning. The buzz of a nearby alarm didn't belong to her. It came from the kitchen counter, where the other nurse had left her phone charging. Rosa blinked awake slowly, the soreness in her neck screaming before her eyes had even adjusted to the dim light. The couch beneath her creaked as she sat up. It was too short for sleep, and the borrowed blanket had slipped to the floor during the night. Her scrubs were still damp from the rain, even after hanging them near the space heater. Her hair smelled like city steam and exhaustion. She stretched quietly, careful not to wake anyone. It's 5:38 a.m. Rosa stood and made her way to the tiny bathroom. She washed her face quickly, brushed her teeth with the travel toothbrush she kept in her bag, and tied her hair back into a tight bun. She didn't bother looking in the mirror for long. She already knew what she'd see. Back in the living room, she unzipped her canvas backpack and pulled out the single item that mattered most to her. A black leather notebook, weathered and heavy. She clutched it with both hands like it might vanish. She opened it to the first page and began flipping through, checking to see if anything had been damaged. The pages were dry, the ink still crisp, the diagrams intact. What she didn't realize, what she couldn't have known, was that something was missing. A page, a loose sheet from the middle, torn at the edge, had slipped out the night before in the rain. She continued flipping. Every page was filled with a mix of medical notations, hand-drawn neural pathways, and case studies. Some pages had sticky notes attached, others were labeled with colored tabs. It looked chaotic to the untrained eye, but it was precise. Every diagram was backed by research, every theory grounded in careful observation. Every proposed treatment came from the same place: grief. Her daughter Sophia had died 3 years ago. Sophia had been 8, full of life, full of stories, full of music. Then one day she woke up with a headache. The next week, she was having trouble walking. 2 weeks after that, she couldn't remember what she had eaten for breakfast. The diagnosis came like a bullet. Rare neurodegenerative disorder, no cure, low survival rate. Rosa had thrown herself into learning everything she could. She had called doctors, read journals, studied case histories. She had taken night classes in neurobiology, spent hours in medical libraries, written to specialists in Switzerland and South Korea. But it hadn't been enough. Sophia died in her arms on a rainy Tuesday. The world kept turning, the bills kept coming, and Rosa lost her home, her savings, and almost her mind. But she hadn't lost her determination. She zipped the notebook closed and placed it gently in her backpack, as if it contained the last remaining piece of her daughter. Because in many ways it did. Rosa slipped out the door without waking her roommate. The apartment complex was still half asleep, silent except for a dripping pipe and the distant hum of early morning traffic. She walked down 3 flights of stairs, pulled her hoodie tighter over her scrub top, and stepped into the cool morning air. Her shoes were still damp, her socks too, but she didn't flinch. She'd been through worse. She boarded the first eastbound bus, using the prepaid pass she kept tucked inside her phone case. The driver didn't look at her. No one did. Rosa sat near the back, hugging her backpack close to her body. The notebook was inside, nestled between an old thermos and a pair of latex gloves she always carried in her bag. At St. Joseph's Hospital, the fluorescent lights of the pediatric intensive care unit flickered to life as the overnight staff began changing shifts. Rosa walked through the lobby, offering tired smiles to the security guard and receptionist. Neither asked why she had arrived before her scheduled shift. They were used to her being early. She moved like clockwork, dropped her bag in the nurse's lounge, clocked in, tied on a disposable gown, reviewed the whiteboard detailing the current patient caseload, but while her hands moved with practiced confidence, her mind was elsewhere. Room 4B, Julian Cortez, age 6, post-separative recovery after brain surgery, still not responding. Rosa made a note. Something about the readings from his EEG yesterday didn't sit right. The night nurse's note suggested stable vitals, but Rosa saw patterns other nurses missed. subtle irregularities, tiny deviations in the neural rhythms. She entered the room quietly. Julian's mother sat sleeping in a chair beside the bed, head tilted against the wall. The boy looked peaceful, but his eyelids fluttered too often. Rosa checked his monitors, adjusted the oxygen flow, and made another mental note. She would read over his scans again after her shift, not because it was expected, but because she couldn't stop herself. These children weren't just patients to her, they were reminders. Every small twitch of a muscle, every delayed response, every spike on a chart, Rosa saw what others didn't. She felt what others missed. After checking in on 2 other patients, Rosa returned briefly to the lounge. She pulled out the notebook and opened it to a page she had been reworking for weeks. A new early detection model for micro-lesions in pediatric brains, the kind Sophia had, the kind Julian might have now. The page was missing. She froze. A gap in the sequence. A page she knew she had sketched last week. The model used color-coded symbols. She remembered the red circle she'd drawn for cortical inflammation, the green arrow for signal tracking. But it wasn't there. Just a torn edge. Her stomach dropped. She checked the other pages, then checked again. The page was gone. She flipped through the notebook a 3rd time, slower this time, holding each page by the corners as if the missing sheet might suddenly reappear. Her breath caught. That page wasn't just an idea. It held real data, notes taken from months of patient observations, experimental charts and breakthrough thoughts jotted down at 3 a.m. during a double shift. It was personal, and it was irreplaceable. Rosa sat down on the edge of the couch in the lounge, trying to replay the night before in her mind. She had held the notebook tightly as she left the hospital. She remembered cradling it under her coat at the bus stop when the rain started. But then, she must have fallen asleep. Just for a few minutes, long enough for something to happen. Her hands trembled. Was it lost on the sidewalk? Did it fall out when she shifted on the bench? Was it soaked, ruined in a puddle somewhere? She buried her face in her palms. No one could know what was in that notebook. Not yet. Not while it was still raw and untested. Not when corporate eyes were always scanning for intellectual property to exploit or bury. That page had contained early-stage treatment simulations based on modified neural feedback loops. It was theoretical, yes, but based on real patient markers. It was a glimpse at something big, something that might save children like Sophia before symptoms became irreversible. She stood up abruptly and walked to the nearest staff bathroom. Once inside, she locked the door and turned on the sink just to have some sound. The fluorescent light flickered above her. Her reflection in the mirror looked pale, shaken. You can't fall apart, not now. She reached into her bag and pulled out a second notebook, an older one, already filled front to back. She flipped through it until she reached a page that listed emergency contact numbers and locations of every file she had ever backed up on encrypted drives. The missing page wasn't backed up, it had been too new. Her thoughts were spinning. What if someone had picked it up? What if someone read it and didn't understand what they were looking at? What if it ended up in the hands of the same people who denied Sophia's treatment 3 years ago? The sound of a pager buzzing on her hip broke through her thoughts. Patient in 4B, spiking a mild fever. Julian. Rosa shoved the notebooks back into her bag, washed her face in cold water, and dried it with a paper towel. She took one last look at herself in the mirror. She would deal with the missing page later. Right now, a little boy needed her, and Rosa Delgado had never let a child down when she had the chance to help. The next morning, Keanu sat at the far corner of his home office, phone in hand, staring at the screen like it might blink first. He hadn't been able to shake the image of the nurse from his mind. The rain, her soaked scrubs, the way she didn't look away. It wasn't pity that lingered in him. It was something deeper, a knowing, a quiet recognition. He finally tapped the speaker icon and called Jody, his longtime assistant. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Jody, I need a favor, something private." "You got it," she replied without hesitation. "I want to know more about someone, a nurse. Her name's Rosa Delgado. She works at St. Joseph's Hospital in Los Angeles." There was a short pause. "Is she okay?" "I don't know," Keanu said. "But she was sleeping at a bus stop in the rain last night, and something about her didn't sit right. I don't want this public, just quiet." Jody's voice was calm but firm. "I'll dig. Give me a few hours." Keanu ended the call and set his phone on the desk. He should have been going over scripts or meeting with his agent about upcoming projects, but none of it mattered right now, not compared to this. Hours later, Jody called back, her voice low and clipped, like she was still processing what she'd found. "I have something. A lot, actually." Keanu sat upright. "Go ahead." "She's been at St. Joseph's for 12 years, works in the pediatric intensive care unit. Her file's solid. Multiple commendations. Best patient outcomes in the entire hospital. Families request her, by name." Keanu nodded slowly. "I could tell." "But here's the thing," Jody continued. "She doesn't have a permanent address on file. Her emergency contact number is a prepaid cell line. No property ownership, no lease in her name for at least 2 years. I checked housing records and found nothing since 2021. "What happened in 2021? Keanu asked. "She lost her daughter, 8 years old. Brain disease. Medical debt piled up after her insurance denied an experimental treatment. She couldn't keep up. Foreclosure. Vehicle repossession. She's been bouncing between couch rentals and working extra shifts ever since." Keanu's chest tightened. "She's still working full-time in the children's unit?" "Refused 3 job offers in the last year. 2 from private hospitals in San Diego, 1 from a research facility in Houston. Each one paid double. She turned them down. Said her patients needed her." He sat in stunned silence. "You still there?" Jody asked. He whispered. He leaned back in his chair, staring out the window. The city below looked the same. But something had changed. She could have walked away. She could have chased comfort. But she stayed. Jody's voice came again. "What do you want to do next?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He just looked out at the horizon, the afternoon sun breaking through the clouds. "I want to see it for myself," he said quietly. That evening, Keanu pulled a dark knit cap over his head and slipped on a pair of simple glasses. No entourage, no security, just a plain gray hoodie, jeans, and the kind of tired eyes that made him blend in with any crowd. He parked 2 blocks away from St. Joseph's and walked the rest of the distance under the faded glow of streetlights. The hospital was quiet at night, but not still. Lights flickered behind drawn blinds. Nurses moved briskly past windows. Ambulance lights glowed in the far bay, a soft red and blue rhythm on the wet pavement. He entered through the main lobby and offered a nod to the security guard. No one recognized him under the cap and glasses. He walked with purpose, holding a clipboard under his arm that Jody had provided, just in case anyone asked. He didn't need to go far. The pediatric wing was on the 2nd floor. The moment the elevator doors opened, he felt it. The silence was different here. He could hear a child crying faintly down the hallway, a lullaby playing softly from a nearby room, the scent of disinfectant, mixed with something sweeter, crayons and artificial grape flavoring from the supply carts. He didn't know exactly where she would be, so he moved slowly, his eyes scanning the nurses at their stations. Most wore the same light blue scrubs. Some sat behind monitors, others charted on tablets. A few were tucking in patients for the night. Then he saw her. Down the hallway, near room 206, Rosa stood beside a hospital bed, one hand gently stroking the hair of a small child, while the other adjusted a line on the IV pole. The girl couldn't have been older than 6. Her eyes were closed, but her lips were twitching like she was dreaming. Rosa leaned in and whispered something so softly that Keanu couldn't hear it. Then she sat down beside the bed and pulled a blanket over her own lap. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't even yawn. She just sat there, watching over the little girl like it was the most natural thing in the world. Keanu took a step back into the shadows, heart heavy. He hadn't expected this to hit him so hard, but there was something about Rosa's stillness, the way she gave her entire presence to a child who might not even remember her face tomorrow. It wasn't performance. It wasn't pride. It was service. The kind that came from heartbreak, not heroism. And in that moment, he understood something clearly. This wasn't about charity. It wasn't about pity or fixing someone's problems with a checkbook. This was about standing beside someone who had already chosen to fight and simply making sure she didn't have to do it alone anymore. Keanu remained tucked near the corner where the hall turned, watching Rosa in silence for several minutes. No one noticed him. The few nurses passing by assumed he was a quiet visitor or a relative waiting for news. But he wasn't waiting. He was learning. Rosa didn't leave the child's side. She checked the monitors twice, flipped through a clipboard resting on the nearby table, and gently wiped the girl's forehead with a damp cloth. Each motion was slow, precise, filled with a tenderness that couldn't be taught in training manuals. When the little girl stirred, Rosa leaned closer, humming softly. A lullaby in Spanish. Quiet, steady, almost prayer-like. Keanu swallowed the lump rising in his throat. He saw a nurse giving far more than her job required. A woman who had likely worked a double shift, gone without rest, and still offered peace to a child on the edge of pain. This was what the world didn't see. This was what most people drove past without a second thought. Eventually, Rosa stood. She walked back toward the nurse's station, rubbing her eyes briefly, trying to shake off her fatigue. She didn't complain. She didn't slump. She pulled up a stool and opened a thick binder of patient notes, flipping pages quickly before adding observations in careful handwriting. She reached into her bag and retrieved a black leather notebook. Keanu's eyes narrowed. That notebook. He recognized it. It was the same one he'd seen her holding the night before, clutched like a shield against the world. She flipped through the pages, landing on one and staring at it for a long moment, as if trying to reconstruct something from memory. Her brow furrowed. Something was missing. Keanu didn't move. He didn't step forward. But in that instant, he understood. He had it. Or at least, a page from it. Back home, lying on his kitchen counter, was a damp sheet of paper he'd picked up from the sidewalk near the bus stop. He hadn't meant to keep it. At the time, he hadn't known what it was, but now, he watched as Rosa slowly closed the notebook and slipped it back into her bag. She stood up, forced a breath through her nose, and returned to room 206. She didn't know she had lost something. And she certainly didn't know that the man who had picked it up was still watching her from the shadows. Keanu turned to leave. He'd seen enough to know one thing for sure. This wasn't over. She wasn't just a nurse in need of help. She was a woman, carrying something powerful. And whatever that notebook contained, it was going to change everything. The morning began with a quiet hum of hospital routine. Buzzing monitors, muffled footsteps, and the occasional whisper from a nurse easing into another 12-hour shift. Rosa arrived early, her bag clutched close, eyes scanning the ground as if afraid of what she might not find again. Her mind hadn't stopped spinning since the realization the night before. The missing page. It wasn't just any note. It contained critical data she had assembled after months of observation and testing, on her own time, with her own patients' anonymized charts. That page held the cornerstone of her modified treatment model for pediatric neuroinflammation. Without it, the framework was incomplete. Her research was fragile enough as it was, and now someone might have it, or worse, might not understand it. She checked her bag again before starting rounds, flipping through the notebook at the nurse's station while pretending to scan patient logs. Still gone. The page wasn't there. She hadn't imagined it. Her hands trembled. By mid-morning, she had settled into her rhythm, moving from bed to bed, checking vitals and offering a gentle squeeze of a shoulder or an extra blanket tucked under a child's chin. But her stomach twisted with every passing hour. Then came the page she didn't expect. At 1:45 p.m., as Rosa was updating a patient chart in room 212, she received a call over the intercom. "Nurse Delgado, administration would like to see you, conference room B." Her heart dropped. She finished the chart, handed it to a float nurse, and walked briskly through the corridor. The conference room had frosted windows and a low hum of air conditioning that made her skin prickle. Inside sat 2 hospital administrators and the senior compliance officer. They didn't greet her with smiles. "Please sit down, Rosa," the compliance officer said, gesturing to a chair. Rosa sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. One of the administrators slid a manila folder across the table toward her. "We received a rather unusual inquiry this morning. Someone contacted our office directly. They asked if the hospital was supporting any independent research being conducted by a staff nurse." Rosa's eyes widened. They referenced pediatric neurology, inflammation pathways, and something called recursive cell behavior patterns. She blinked, trying to maintain her composure. That phrase, recursive cell behavior, was hers. It wasn't public. It wasn't published. She'd made it up to describe her observations. Whoever contacted them had read that page. "I'm not conducting unauthorized research," she said quickly. "I'm studying on my own time. I've never used patient names. I've never run trials. It's just personal work, notes." The compliance officer raised an eyebrow. "We'd like to remind you that while your passion is commendable, engaging in unsanctioned research, particularly if it influences your care, is a liability risk. There are protocols." "I haven't violated any," Rosa said, her voice trembling. They said nothing for a moment. Then one administrator spoke quietly. "Be careful, Rosa. You're a good nurse. Don't give anyone a reason to question that." Rosa nodded slowly, heart pounding as she stood from the chair. The message was clear. Not a termination, not even a formal write-up, but a warning, plain as day. They were watching her now. One wrong step, one assumption that crossed the invisible line between care and innovation, and she'd be branded reckless instead of resourceful. She walked out of the conference room into the corridor, blinking under the harsh fluorescent lights. The sterile white walls that had once comforted her now felt like they were pressing inward. She clutched her notebook tighter, her thoughts spinning in circles. Who would contact the hospital about her research? Who even knew about it? That page. The missing page. Someone had it. And now they knew what she was working on. She spent the rest of her shift trying to push it from her mind, but the tension never left her chest. Her hands moved through the motions of care, checking IV lines, logging vitals, whispering comfort to a toddler with pneumonia. But her mind stayed caught in that conference room, in that unspoken threat. When her shift finally ended, Rosa made her way to the locker room on the basement level. She moved slower than usual, her body heavy from fatigue and stress. The hallway was empty. The hum of the vending machine was the only sound as she rounded the corner toward her locker. That's when she saw it. A plain white envelope taped carefully to the center of her locker door. She froze. It had no name, no logo, just 3 words handwritten across the front in thick, black ink. "You're not invisible." Rosa stared, breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled as she peeled the envelope from the locker and opened it slowly. Inside, folded with care, was the missing page from her notebook. It was dry, neatly flattened. No wrinkles from the rain, no smudges. Whoever had picked it up had preserved it like it was something sacred. Beneath the page was a second note, written on the back of a coffee receipt. "What you're doing matters. Don't stop." That was it. No signature, no clue. Rosa stood there, eyes wide, frozen in a mix of awe and confusion. Her chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something harder to name, something close to being seen. Like the universe had, for just a moment, acknowledged her presence. She looked up and down the hall. Empty. Was it someone from the hospital? No one knew about the page. No one would write those words unless they understood. Unless they'd seen her that night. Her mind flashed back to the bus stop, to the sound of the motorcycle engine fading into the rain. Keanu. Could it have been him? Why would he care? The thought lingered in her mind as she gathered her things. Keanu Reeves was the kind of man everyone recognized, but the one she'd seen through the rain that night hadn't acted like a celebrity. He hadn't waved, hadn't smirked, hadn't even spoken. He had simply looked at her, really looked, and then driven off into the dark. She had dismissed it as coincidence. But now, her hands folded the page carefully and placed it back into her notebook. Her eyes lingered on the note once more before she folded that too, slipping it into the side pocket. The words burned in her chest. What you're doing matters. No one had said those words to her in years. Not since her daughter passed. Not since her former supervisor warned her to stop wasting time on personal theories. Not since the grant she applied for was denied and the research university declined her fellowship because she didn't have a doctorate. She had been dismissed, ignored, passed over, but not by whoever left this envelope. Rosa walked to her car, gripping her bag tightly. She didn't feel fear now. She felt something more dangerous, hope. A spark too long denied oxygen. Whoever had found her notes, they hadn't judged her. They hadn't tried to steal her work or discredit her. They'd returned it, encouraged her, lifted her from the shadows where she'd been hiding. Still, questions swirled. Had Keanu really gone out of his way to find out who she was? Had he read enough to understand the gravity of her ideas? And why wouldn't he just approach her directly? As she sat behind the wheel, she stared out through the windshield at the quiet city street. Her reflection stared back at her, tired, drawn, and yet somehow more alive than she'd felt in weeks. Maybe it didn't matter who had returned the page. What mattered was that someone had noticed. Someone believed. But part of her still wanted to know. Not for pride, for connection. Because fighting alone, grieving alone, was exhausting. She drove home slowly that night, the rain returning in soft, steady drops. The rhythm on her windshield reminded her of hospital monitors. Constant, measured, alive. The envelope sat in her passenger seat, and deep inside her, something shifted. No one had handed her a miracle. Her life was still hard, her debt still crushing, her grief still sharp. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like someone was watching. Not to judge, not to stop her, but to stand just behind her in the dark, quietly, and maybe, just maybe, ready to help her change the world. The next morning, Keanu sat at his kitchen table, staring at the note he'd left unsigned. The words he had written, "You're not invisible. What you're doing matters. Don't stop," echoed in his head. It hadn't been much, just a quiet gesture, but he'd seen the look in Rosa's eyes when she sat beside that dying child. He couldn't forget it. His assistant Jody arrived with her usual brisk energy, carrying a cup of black coffee and her tablet in hand. She was halfway through reading off his schedule when Keanu stopped her. "Jody," he said gently, "can we skip the morning brief? I need to talk to you about something else." She blinked, surprised. Keanu rarely veered from routine unless it was serious. "Sure," she said, setting the coffee down and taking a seat across from him. He reached into a drawer and pulled out the damp page, the one he'd carefully dried the night before. Rosa's handwriting was delicate, precise, and filled with words Jody didn't recognize. But it wasn't the technical jargon that caught her off guard. It was the emotion in Keanu's face. "You remember that nurse I asked you about?" he said. Rosa Delgado, she replied. He nodded. I saw her again, not just sleeping at the bus stop. I watched her inside the hospital with a child who was dying. She didn't know anyone was watching, but I saw it. The way she sat beside that little girl, the way she held her hand like it was the only thing holding the world together. Jody stayed quiet. Keanu's voice dropped, more personal than usual. When I was a kid, my sister Kim, she had a neurological disorder. Rare. The kind that eats away at your confidence as a parent because nobody has answers. My mom was alone. Dad had disappeared years before. We were broke. I was barely 10 years old, and all I remember is how scared everyone was all the time. He paused. There was this one nurse, he continued. We didn't even know her name for the first few weeks. She wasn't flashy. She didn't promise miracles. But she showed up every day. Sometimes all she did was sit in the room with Kim when my mom couldn't. But it made a difference. My mom used to say that woman saved her more than the doctors did. He looked back down at Rosa's page. Since then, I've always had this quiet respect for nurses. People celebrate actors, CEOs, athletes, but the people who hold your kid's hand at 3 a.m., they're invisible. Rosa shouldn't be invisible. Jody looked at him, her voice soft. What do you want to do? I want to help her, he said. Not with a check, not publicly. But if what's on this page is real, if she's onto something, then someone in pediatric neurology needs to see it. Jody leaned forward, fingers already flying across her tablet. I know someone. Evelyn Hart. She's one of the top pediatric neurologists in the country, published, respected. She consults for NIH and even UNICEF. More importantly, she's blunt and fair. If there's something worth noticing here, she'll say so. Keanu nodded. Can you reach out to her discreetly? I don't want Rosa dragged into anything without her knowing. I just want a second set of eyes on this. Quietly. Jody smiled. You got it. She sent the message within minutes, attaching a scanned copy of Rosa's page with no name, no identifying information, just a note that Keanu had come across a handwritten model for a possible pediatric neurotreatment and wanted confidential expert insight. Then they waited. Not even 20 minutes later, Jody's tablet chimed. She opened the reply and her eyebrows shot up. Keanu looked over. What is it? Jody turned the screen toward him. Dr. Evelyn Hart's reply was short but striking. If this is about Rosa Delgado, we need to talk, immediately. Keanu sat back, stunned. She knows her? Jody shook her head. I didn't even include her name. The room went still for a moment. Keanu whispered. Then she recognized the work. They agreed to a video call that evening, using a secure private line. Keanu paced most of the afternoon, thoughts swirling. Who was Rosa, really? How far had her work reached without her realizing it? And what had Evelyn Hart seen in that single page? That night, Jody connected the call from her laptop. Dr. Hart appeared on screen, glasses perched on her nose, silver hair pulled into a tight bun. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Mr. Reeves, she said, I don't know how you came across that paper, but I've only seen fragments like that once before, 3 years ago, a conference in San Diego, an open mic night for obscure pediatric models. One nurse stood up and presented part of a theory related to neural regeneration using non-invasive stimulus loops in children. Keanu leaned in. Was it Rosa? Hart nodded. Yes, Rosa Delgado. She didn't have slides or funding. She wasn't even on the speaker list. She got 2 minutes, but what she said caught everyone off guard. It was radical, but brilliant. When we asked for more, she disappeared, said she wasn't ready. Keanu's voice was quiet. Why? Because, Hart said, she was grieving. Her daughter had died just months before. I think she was working through pain, and her research became part of that. Hart paused, her voice softening. That one page you sent me, Mr. Reeves, It's enough to suggest she's continued developing her model. Quietly, maybe even in the hospital library at night. If she's still working alone, she could be sitting on one of the most forward-thinking pediatric neurological frameworks I've seen in years. Keanu felt the weight of her words settle over the room. Dr. Hart adjusted her glasses. You need to understand something. If Rosa's working in isolation, that's dangerous. Not just for her career, but for her emotionally. Research this intense. It consumes people, especially when it's tied to personal loss. Keanu nodded slowly. That's what I felt watching her. It wasn't just about the job. She's holding something inside. She's been holding it too long, Hart said. But if she'd be willing to come forward again, I'd offer her a mentorship right now. I can get her into a fellowship program. Quietly, there are grants she'd qualify for. We can even help publish her findings in stages. But we need to be delicate. Keanu leaned back. Rosa's proud and private. I don't think she trusts institutions anymore. She's seen how they overlook people like her. Hart gave a knowing smile. That's why you need to be the bridge. She won't listen to someone in a white coat, but she might listen to someone who's seen her pain and didn't look away. Jody added, We can't push too fast. Keanu, maybe you approach her, gently. Let her know she's not alone in this. Keanu nodded again, this time more firmly. I'll do it. No cameras, no press, just me. Hart looked directly into the camera. If you get her to meet with me, even once, I promise I'll protect her work, her voice, and her heart. The call ended, but the mission had begun. Later that night, Keanu stood alone in his private study. He picked up the worn envelope that Rosa had received, still holding the dry page she thought had been lost. He thought about the nurse who'd once stood beside his sister. He thought about his mother, who'd said that woman had saved her sanity during the worst nights of her life. Then he thought of Rosa, soaked in the rain, still holding her notebook like it was worth more than shelter, more than food. And he understood. She hadn't just been clinging to pages. She'd been holding on to the last thing she had left of her daughter. Keanu placed the envelope gently in a folder, then turned to Jody. Let's set it up, he said. I'll go to her. Outside, the rain was starting again, and somewhere across the city, a woman was putting away her notebook for the night, still unaware that a stranger had seen her in the dark and chosen not to walk away, but to walk toward her. With quiet purpose. 3 days later, Keanu met Dr. Evelyn Hart in person. The meeting took place in the back of a quiet medical research library near UCLA. No press, no assistants, just two people, seated at a long wooden table tucked between shelves of old neurology journals. Dr. Hart was already there when Keanu arrived, reviewing a printed set of notes. She looked up as he sat down, her eyes tired but sharp. I'm glad you came, she said. Keanu gave a respectful nod. I felt like this needed to be face-to-face. Hart didn't waste time. She slid a file across the table. Before we talk about the future, you need to know the past. I knew Rosa's daughter. Keanu's expression shifted. Hart continued. Her name was Sophia. 3 years ago, she was brought into the pediatric neurology unit at Cedars-Sinai. She was 5, diagnosed with a rare neurodegenerative disorder, vanishing white matter disease. One of the cruelest conditions I've ever seen. It strips away motor function, speech, even emotional recognition. Children regress, sometimes within weeks. It's horrifying. Keanu swallowed hard. I was brought in as a consultant, Hart said. Not because I had a cure, but because Rosa, even then, wasn't like other parents. She showed up with binders. Not grief. Data. Ideas. She had theories about regenerative stimulus. She had a treatment hypothesis. And you know what? It wasn't crazy. Hart leaned in, her voice lower. We developed a plan, an experimental protocol, Risky, yes, but it had merit. Rosa was willing to sign all liability waivers. I signed off on it too, but the hospital administration wouldn't approve it. Their hands were tied by insurance policies. The board said no. She paused, her jaw tightening. The last time I saw Sophia alive, she was in her mother's arms in that pediatric ICU, and Rosa was still writing. Even as her daughter faded, she didn't stop, because she believed, somewhere in all that pain, there was a way to save another child. Keanu looked down at the table. She lost her daughter and kept going, he said quietly. She didn't just keep going, Hart said. She got better, smarter, more precise. Over the last 2 years, I've been receiving anonymous papers through encrypted channels. At first, I thought they were from a research fellow. But the style, the language, it was hers. I knew it. Keanu blinked. You're saying Rosa's been publishing? Silently, without taking credit. Because she knows the risk, Hart said. Some of her ideas challenge big pharmaceutical norms. They threaten funding models. If she's exposed without institutional protection, she won't just be ignored. She could be blacklisted, silenced. Keanu leaned forward. Has anyone else found out? Hart hesitated. A few whispers in academic circles, but no confirmation. Yet, Keanu's eyes narrowed slightly. If her work is that powerful, why isn't someone backing her already? Dr. Hart sighed. Because she doesn't have a degree in research science. No PhD, no tenured position. She's a nurse. A brilliant one, but in this world, that doesn't open doors. It closes them. She looked at Keanu with a painful clarity. The system doesn't like disruption, unless it can control it. And Rosa can't be controlled. She's been doing this on scraps of paper, on breaks, in hospital corners. No grants, no sponsors, just grief and grit. Keanu felt a quiet burn building in his chest. What exactly are they trying to silence? He asked. Hart pulled out another sheet of paper from her file. This, she said. A condensed adaptation of one of her protocols. It's a non-invasive regenerative model using timed cognitive stimuli, integrated with adaptive neurofeedback. If tested, it could rewrite how we treat pediatric neurodegeneration. She looked up. Do you know what that means? Keanu nodded slowly. It means fewer kids spending their last months hooked to machines. Hart's voice cracked slightly. It means hope for conditions we've called untreatable for decades. There was a pause. The sounds of distant shuffling books filled the room, soft and eerie. Then Hart spoke again. But here's the danger. Pharmaceutical companies have invested billions into drugs designed to manage symptoms, long-term prescriptions that don't cure, only delay. What Rosa's proposing could reduce the need for those drugs. Entire profit chains could collapse. That's why she's vulnerable. Keanu leaned back. His hands were folded, but his knuckles had gone white. Hart said gently, if someone exposes her before she's protected, they won't just discredit her. They'll destroy her reputation. They'll twist the narrative. Say she was running unauthorized experiments, that she endangered patients. Even if none of it's true, the damage will be done. Keanu's jaw tightened. Then we protect her, he said, firm and quiet. Hart studied him. How far are you willing to go? All the way, Keanu replied. Whatever it takes. This isn't about headlines. This is personal. Hart gave a slow, understanding nod. Then we'll need to move carefully. She needs allies in high places, not publicity, protection. She needs a foundation, something official, and someone she trusts to bring her in. Keanu nodded. She doesn't trust institutions, but maybe she'll trust someone who didn't walk away when he saw her in the rain. Hart smiled faintly. Then you might be her only chance. The room went quiet again. Then Keanu stood. "Send me everything. I want to understand it all." Hart rose too. "I'll help you, but we don't have much time. If someone already contacted her hospital, we may be closer to a leak than we think." Keanu glanced out the window, where rain had just started to fall again. Keanu left the meeting with Hart carrying more than just a folder of research papers. He carried the weight of something deeper, something that connected Rosa's pain with his own. The memory of his sister's fragile frame, the hospital beeps in the middle of the night, and that nurse who never asked for thanks but changed everything by simply being present. Later that evening, Keanu sat alone in his home office. The rain tapped against the windows like fingers urging him to act. Jody brought him tea, but he barely noticed it cooling beside him. His eyes were fixed on Rosa's diagrams, her notations, the careful handwriting in the margins. She wrote like someone desperate not to waste a second of thought. No wasted lines, no fluff, just clarity, precision. One sentence in the corner of a chart caught his attention. "Even if I'm never published, if this saves one child, Sophia's life meant something." He closed the folder and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't just science, it was a mother's last promise. A knock came at the door. It was Jody. "She just got called into another double shift," she said softly. "Same ward, pediatric IC." Keanu nodded. Jody hesitated. "You still want to meet her?" "Yes," he said, almost a whisper. "But not yet. I don't want to spook her." "She's scared," Jody added. "The hospital is asking questions about her notes. She thinks someone's watching." Keanu looked at her. "Someone is, but not the way she thinks." That night, Rosa walked through the dimly lit halls of St. Joseph's, unaware that her world was shifting behind the scenes. She comforted a child who was struggling to breathe, sang quietly as she changed the sheets, and returned to her corner in the break room, where her notebook sat inside a locked drawer. But across town, in a warm, quiet house filled with silence and thought, a plan was taking shape. Keanu Reeves was not a doctor. He wasn't a scientist or a policymaker, but he was something else. He was someone who didn't look away. And in a world full of noise, distraction, and convenience, that was the rarest thing of all. The next morning, before the sun came up, Keanu picked up his phone and dialed Dr. Hart. "She's not going to believe me if I just show up," he said. Hart replied, "Then maybe we let her come to you." He paused. "Let's invite her somewhere unexpected," he said. "Somewhere she can ask the questions first." There was a silence on the line. Then Hart replied, "I know just the place." And with that, the quiet resistance had begun. It started with a memo. A quiet one. Buried in the daily bulletins. Rosa found it taped to the staff refrigerator when she came in for her early shift. Internal audit ongoing. All departments are reminded to maintain updated logs and documentation for review. That alone wouldn't have raised concern. But then, within hours, she was called into the administrative wing. "Please bring your personal notes, patient interaction logs, and any off-duty research relevant to pediatric care," the message read. The wording was clinical, cold, but Rosa felt her stomach twist as she held the paper. She walked past the pediatric ward, where soft laughter still echoed despite the hard walls. She didn't smile back today. In the nurses' station, people were whispering. "Did you see the guy in the navy suit?" Farmer rep. "Not the first one this week. I heard they're looking into someone. Something about unsanctioned protocols." Rosa kept her head down, but her heart pounded. Her drawer, the one with her notebook, felt like it was pulsing with heat, like someone might break it open at any second. By mid-morning, 2 men appeared near the IC. Not hospital staff. No ID badges. One of them lingered outside the pediatric supply room. Another walked through the break room and took photos of the whiteboard. Rosa asked quietly at the front desk, "Do you know who those men are?" "Corporate," the receptionist whispered. "They're not saying much. Something about liability." It was happening. Everything she feared. That her research, the years of careful work done with love, desperation, and heartbreak, was now a threat to someone powerful, and now it had triggered a hunt. She considered taking a sick day, just walking out the front door. But then she heard a sound from room 403, a cough. Shallow, weak. She turned and saw the attending physician wave her over. "New case," he said. 7 years old. Transferred from the ER this morning. Elevated intracranial pressure, seizures overnight. Unexplained deterioration. We've ruled out infection." Rosa stepped inside. The boy's name was Eli. Dark hair, pale skin, eyes fluttering under the weight of exhaustion. Rosa barely breathed as she read his chart. The symptoms lined up too precisely. Just like Sophia, she sat beside the bed and placed a gentle hand on his arm. No mother was there yet. He'd been dropped off by an aunt while the family scrambled to arrange time off and transportation. She whispered, "Hold on, sweetheart." That night, after her shift had technically ended, Rosa returned to Eli's room. She double-checked the monitors, quietly adjusted his stimulation schedule, and slipped a small portable audio device under his pillow, preloaded with a pattern she had designed over not medication, just rhythm, and she had tested dozens of times in her notes. If it worked, Eli's brainwave patterns would begin to regulate by morning. If it didn't, he'd be no worse off. She didn't sleep that night. Again. By dawn, Rosa's hands trembled as she prepared the morning medication trays. She hadn't left the hospital since the previous night. She'd used the staff shower, changed into fresh scrubs from her locker, and tried to keep her expression neutral. But inside, her nerves were fraying. She checked Eli's room the moment the sun lit the window blinds. He was still asleep, but something had changed. His oxygen levels were stable, his heart rate less erratic. Most striking of all, his seizures hadn't returned during the night. The attending nurse hadn't noticed yet. He attributed it to the new IV fluids. Rosa knew better. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from cautious hope. She took her notebook into the stairwell and jotted down everything she'd observed. She logged the waveform patterns from the monitor, the timestamps of his REM cycles, and every audible response he made overnight. She felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself in a long time. Possibility. But just as quickly as it came, it was shattered. 2 hours into her shift, Rosa was called into the administrator's office. Her heart sank. She took a deep breath and walked the long hallway past the offices where decisions were made, far above her pay grade. The door to the conference room was already open. Inside were 3 people, 2 from hospital compliance and 1 man in a dark suit she'd never seen before. "Rosa Delgado," the administrator began, "we've received a report of irregular treatment adjustments in the pediatric ICU." She froze. The administrator continued, "A staff member claims they witnessed you altering a care plan without a physician's authorization." Rosa opened her mouth to respond, but her voice caught. The man in the suit leaned forward. "We've also been made aware of unpublished research materials in your possession, including content that aligns with an anonymous submission flagged in a recent pharmaceutical legal inquiry." Rosa's vision tunneled, her fingers dug into the edge of her scrubs. She hadn't shared her research. She hadn't spoken of it to anyone but her old roommate Maria, and even then only in fragments. How had it gotten traced? The administrator's tone softened slightly, but not enough to remove the threat. "You'll need to submit all notebooks, devices, and any personal documentation related to treatment outside of hospital protocol. Effective immediately, we're placing you on administrative leave pending a full review." "I didn't harm him," Rosa whispered. "I helped him." The man in the suit gave a dismissive smile. "That's not your call to make." She stood frozen in the doorway. The administrator nodded to a security officer waiting nearby. "Please collect your belongings and exit through the north staff door." Rosa's ears rang. Not again. Not after Sophia. And this time, She hadn't lost a child, but she might lose everything else. Rosa returned to the pediatric wing like a ghost walking among the living. No one met her eyes. The other nurses sensed what had happened. They weren't told explicitly, but word always spread fast in hospitals. Someone had reported her. Someone had whispered her name behind closed doors. She gathered her few belongings in silence. Her bag, her notebook, a change of scrubs. She opened her locker slowly, half expecting the page to be missing again, but it was still there. She touched the folded edge gently. Then she turned and looked down the hallway. At the end, through a glass pane, she could see Eli's room. A nurse stood by his bed, adjusting his blanket. The machines were still on. The rhythm she had started, still running. And in that moment, Rosa didn't feel defeated. She felt defiant. If she was going to be punished for helping a sick child, then so be it. If her work was dangerous to people protecting profits instead of lives, she would carry that burden. But as she stepped toward the exit, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You are not alone. Don't go quiet." She looked around. No one was watching. Or maybe they were. She slipped the phone into her bag and walked out through the back door. The rain had started again, soft and cold, just like the night she had first met the stranger on the motorcycle, the night that had set all of this in motion. She crossed the street, but didn't go home. She sat at the same bus stop as before. Same cracked bench, same flickering light. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. Just still. And waiting. Across the city, Keanu sat in a quiet room with Jody. She had received the hospital's alert before Rosa even left the building. "She's been suspended," Jody said. "The formal termination might come by morning." Keanu didn't speak for a while. Then he stood and walked to the window. "Do we know who reported her?" "No, but based on what Dr. Hart warned us, I'd guess it's coming from higher up." He nodded. Then he picked up his phone. "Get me Evelyn," he said quietly. "Tell her I want to meet. Tonight." Jody paused. "Keanu, if you get involved now, publicly, there's no turning back." He turned, his voice low and steady. "Sheen stood by a dying child when no one else would. She didn't ask for permission to be brave." Jody met his gaze. "I'll set it up." Outside, Rosa remained at the bus stop, unaware that somewhere in the shadows, wheels were already turning. Not to crush her, but to lift her up. The boardroom was already in session when the doors opened. Hospital administrators turned in confusion. The head of compliance narrowed his eyes. A junior legal assistant dropped her pen. Keanu Reeves walked in without a word, wearing a black jacket still damp from the rain. He didn't smile. He didn't ask permission. He simply said, "I'm here to speak with Rosa Delgado, privately." For a moment, no one moved. Then the hospital director stood. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reeves, but this is a confidential proceeding. We can't allow—" Keanu cut him off, politely but firmly. "This is about a nurse you were going to suspend without hearing her side. If you want to continue this meeting in front of the press, we can make that happen." The room fell silent. One of the board members nodded reluctantly. "Rosa is in the adjacent office." Keanu nodded. "Thank you." He walked past them, opened the inner office door, and found Rosa sitting alone at a long table. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. She looked up, stunned. "You," she said softly. Keanu closed the door behind him. Rosa stood slowly. Her voice was brittle with emotion. "What are you doing here?" He stepped forward, not rushing, not towering, just present. Fully present. "I saw you," he said, "that night, at the bus stop." Rosa's eyes searched his face, not sure what he meant. "I was riding home from set. I passed you in the rain. You were asleep. You looked like you hadn't rested in days." She didn't respond. "I rode away," Keanu continued. "But something about your face stayed with me. The pride in it, the exhaustion, the strength. She sat again, her breath shaky. "I came back later," he said. "You were gone, but I found something. A page half-soaked, folded beneath the bench." Her eyes widened. "I dried it. I read it. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood the urgency. I had someone I trust verify what it was. Then I started asking questions." "You shouldn't have," Rosa said quietly, her voice trembling. "This isn't your fight." "It became mine," Keanu said, "because someone like you shouldn't be punished for trying to save a child." Rosa looked away. "They'll destroy my career." "No," Keanu said. "They won't." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. He placed it on the table in front of her. "My foundation has been working on pediatric research initiatives for the past 5 years, mostly in honor of my sister." Rosa blinked, not expecting that. "I've spoken to Dr. Hart," Keanu continued. "She believes your research can revolutionize how we treat early-stage neurological disorders." Rosa didn't touch the envelope. "I'm offering you full support. A research center built around your protocols, staff, equipment, legal protection. You'd lead it on your terms." Her eyes filled, but she didn't let a tear fall. "You think I want charity?" Keanu shook his head. "This isn't charity, it's justice. And it's legacy. Yours." Rosa stared at the envelope for a long time, her hands refusing to move. "I don't want to be someone's project," she said finally. "I don't want my daughter's name turned into a fundraising slogan." "You think I would do that?" Keanu asked, his tone quiet but firm. "I don't know you," she replied. "All I know is that every time someone powerful gets involved, it ends with someone like me getting hurt." Keanu nodded slowly. "That's fair. You've had every reason to lose faith." He stepped back from the table, giving her space. "When my sister Kim got sick, there was a nurse. Not a doctor, not a specialist, just a nurse. She used to stay late. She held Kim's hand when the treatments made her scream. She brought her music, read to her from Jane Austen. My mother said that nurse gave her more hope than anyone else ever did." Rosa looked up. "After Kim recovered, I tried to find that nurse," Keanu continued. "But she'd already moved on. No one remembered her name. It's bothered me for years. I never got to say, thank you." He paused. "And then one night, I saw a woman sleeping at a bus stop, soaked to the skin, wearing scrubs, and I thought, maybe this time I don't walk away." Rosa's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm not the same woman I was before my daughter died. That girl you read about in the paper, she was real. Her name was Sophia. She wanted to be a surgeon. She had a laugh that could stop an entire hallway. Her shoulders trembled, but still no tears came. When she died, something in me broke. I stopped talking to people. I stopped believing in systems. I just started reading, learning. I wanted to know what the doctors didn't." Keanu sat across from her. "And you found something." "I think so," she said. "But I never meant for it to go public. I wanted the next Sophia to have a chance." He leaned in, careful not to pressure her. "Then come work with us. Build that chance into something real." "And what if the hospital fires me anyway?" she asked. "What if they blacklist me? Take away my license?" "You'll have a legal team by your side," Keanu said. "Top people. You won't be fighting alone anymore." Rosa looked at him, unsure whether to believe it, unsure whether it was even safe to believe. "I need time," she said softly. "You have it," Keanu replied. He stood and gently pushed the envelope closer to her. "There's a private number inside. When you're ready." As he walked to the door, Rosa called out, "Are you really doing this?" Keanu turned. "Because when someone risks everything to save a child, the world should stop and listen. And if it won't, I will." Then he opened the door and stepped back into the corridor. Rosa remained behind, the envelope still unopened, her heart louder than the rain against the glass. and for the first time in years, she felt something new rise in her chest. Not fear, not rage, but hope. 3 days later, Rosa walked into the administrator's office and placed her resignation on the desk. The hospital director glanced at it, startled. He tried to hide it behind a professional nod, but Rosa could see the shift in his eyes. "You're making a mistake," he said, stiffly. "This could affect your credentials." "I'm aware," Rosa replied, her voice steady. She turned and walked out of the building for the last time. Not in disgrace, but with quiet determination. She had no press release, no grand gesture, just the truth folded into her notebook and the image of her daughter, Sophia, forever smiling, from the photo tucked inside its cover. By that afternoon, the news broke. A single headline, discreetly placed on an independent health site, made its way to trending status in under 6 hours. Keanu Reeves funds Pediatric Neurology Center, led by former nurse Rosa Delgado. And with that, the firestorm began. Within 24 hours, anonymous social media accounts began flooding comment sections. Posts accused Rosa of falsifying credentials. Others called her unstable or a grief-obsessed activist with no medical credibility. Fake screenshots circulated of supposed patient complaints. Blogs with suspicious funding sources began publishing articles under false names, hinting at mental illness, failed treatments, even fictional malpractice claims. Dr. Evelyn Hart called Keanu directly. "They're scared," she said. "That means you're winning." But Rosa wasn't prepared for how personal the attacks became. A photo of her at the bus stop, sleeping, soaked in rain, surfaced with cruel captions. A podcast host laughed through a segment titled, "Would you trust this woman with your child?" Her old apartment complex received calls demanding her eviction, even though she had already left. Keanu met with Rosa in a private office tucked inside his foundation's building in Culver City. Her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, but not defeat. "They're tearing me apart," she said quietly. "And they're not even coming after my research. They're coming after me." "They're using fear," Keanu said. "Because they can't disprove what you found?" Behind him, Jody stepped forward with a leather folder. Inside was the start of something new, a legal defense team specializing in whistleblower protection, medical ethics, and intellectual property. "They'll protect everything you've built," Jody said gently. "Every word you wrote, every file you saved, it's already being archived in multiple jurisdictions. And your work will continue," Keanu added. "You're not alone anymore." Still, Rosa didn't smile. She just exhaled slowly. That night, she moved into a small, protected residence owned by the foundation. It was clean, quiet, and equipped with everything she needed. Security, Wi-Fi, even a small desk facing the window. She unpacked only 2 things, Sophia's photo and the notebook. Then, just as she placed the notebook on the desk, her phone vibrated with an encrypted message. Jody had forwarded a leak from a whistleblower. The contents froze Rosa in place. It was a series of internal emails from a major insurance provider dated 3 years earlier, the same year Sophia died. The emails discussed an experimental neurological protocol for pediatric patients. One executive wrote bluntly, "Too expensive. If we approve this one, we'll have to approve dozens more. Shut it down." The protocol they rejected? It matched the exact one Rosa had developed independently months later, line for line. Her hands trembled, not just with grief now, but with proof. Real, undeniable proof. Rosa stared at the screen for a long time, the whistleblower's message still open. She scrolled slowly through the remaining emails, reading words that didn't just validate her work. They confirmed the cost of corporate decisions made in boardrooms far from hospital beds. Terms like acceptable loss projections and cost-benefit justifications circled in her head like poison. Her daughter's name wasn't in any of the documents, but the denial might as well have been addressed to her personally. Her daughter had been a statistic, not a child. not a soul. Just a number under a red column marked "Denied." The next morning, Keanu met with a journalist from a respected medical ethics publication. The article they planned to release would include the whistleblower evidence, but with strict anonymity protocols. The journalist asked, "Are you prepared for the backlash if we publish this?" Keanu didn't blink. "I'm not the one who needs protecting. Rosa is." The story ran with the headline, "Leaked emails reveal denial of life-saving pediatric treatment due to cost concerns." The article didn't name Rosa. It didn't need to. Doctors across the country recognized the protocol. Nurses started reaching out anonymously, sharing their own suppressed research, patient cases that mirrored Sophia's, and gratitude that someone had finally said it out loud. Dr. Hart held a press briefing the next day. She stood behind a podium at the edge of the UCLA medical campus and delivered her words carefully. "I have worked in pediatric neurology for 35 years. I have seen miracles denied because they were inconvenient. Rosa Delgado's research is real. Her loss was real. And this time, we are not going to let silence win." Reporters tried to steer the conversation toward Keanu, his motivations, his presence, but he refused interviews. He released only one sentence through his foundation's spokesperson. "The question is not why I'm doing this, the question is why no one did sooner." As the article gained traction, so did public outcry. Social media, once filled with trolls, began to shift. Parents began sharing photos of their own children, those lost, those still fighting, alongside hashtags like "Let Nurses Lead" and "Sophia Deserved Better." Now, let nurses... A mother from Minnesota shared her own story of a denied treatment plan for her son with nearly identical symptoms to Sophia's. Her post went viral overnight. Rosa watched it unfold from her small apartment, overwhelmed by the scale of what she had accidentally begun. She hadn't asked to lead anything. She just wanted her daughter's death to mean something. But the tide was turning. The hospital that had once threatened to suspend her released a statement claiming they supported innovative staff and regret any misunderstandings. Rosa didn't respond. She had no interest in rejoining them. Instead, she focused on what came next. Keanu brought her to the new research center's temporary headquarters, just a modest building near Santa Monica, but already outfitted with medical advisors, tech consultants, and a pediatric ethics board. Rosa walked the halls in silence. No fanfare, no signs with her name, just possibility. In one of the meeting rooms, a whiteboard already displayed sketches of treatment plans, diagrams, and a question written in blue ink. "How many Sophias are still waiting?" Rosa stood frozen. Then she picked up a marker and circled the question. Underneath it, she wrote, "No more waiting." Outside the building, press vans had started parking nearby, cameras aimed in anticipation. But Rosa didn't go out the front door. She slipped out the side, hoodie pulled over her head, notebook pressed to her chest. She wasn't here for the spotlight. She was here for justice. And now the world had begun to listen. The meeting room was quiet, except for the soft hum of an air vent overhead. Keanu sat beside Rosa at a long table, facing 6 families seated in a gentle half-circle. There were no media, no cameras, just parents holding photo albums, clutching folded notes, and wearing the kinds of expressions that only grief could etch into a face. These were the parents of children who had died from the same rare neurological illness that had taken Sophia. Every one of them had faced the same denial. Experimental treatments withheld. Doctors told them there were no options. Insurance companies refusing to cover procedures they had begged for. Rosa glanced around the room, her throat tight. Each set of eyes told a different version of the same story. A little girl who loved birds and died before her 8th birthday. A boy who played the drums until he couldn't hold sticks anymore. A teenager who journaled her pain so her mother wouldn't feel alone after she was gone. Rosa stood slowly, notebook in hand. "My daughter's name was Sophia," she said softly. She was 7. She loved puzzles, and she hated green beans. She died in my arms after they told me her treatment wasn't cost-effective. The room held its breath. "I worked at the hospital where she passed," Rosa continued. "I begged them to try something new. They said it wasn't in the guidelines. So I wrote my own." She looked down, voice trembling. "And for years, I wondered if I was crazy, if I was just a grieving mother pretending to be a scientist. But then I saw all of you, and I realized this isn't just about one child. It never was." A woman across the table nodded slowly. Her hands were wrapped around a small, colorful drawing. "My son Cody," she said. "He had seizures, just like you described. He used to draw pictures when the pain got too much, said it helped him pretend he was somewhere else." She extended the drawing toward Rosa. The paper was soft with age, its edges curled. The crayon colors had faded slightly, but the image was unmistakable. A nurse, wearing scrubs and a halo, with angel wings spread wide. A child rested in her arms, eyes closed peacefully. "And made this for you," the mother said through tears. He said, "Maybe if an angel nurse finds me, I won't hurt any more." Rosa took the drawing carefully, her fingers trembling. She couldn't speak. Her tears said more than any words could. Keanu leaned forward, staring at the sketch. He didn't need to say anything either. The meaning was clear. Later that night, back at the Foundation headquarters, Keanu walked into Jody's office with the drawing in his hand. "This," he said quietly, placing it on her desk, "is what the center needs to be called." Jody looked at the paper, then at Keanu. Her eyes filled with emotion. "The Angel Wing Project?" she asked. Keanu nodded. "Not just a name, a promise." The next morning, an announcement went out to supporters and press. The new pediatric research center would now be called the Angel Wing Project, a place dedicated to children lost, those still fighting, and the legacy of every nurse who refused to stop caring. But Keanu wasn't done yet. 2 days later, a video dropped online without warning. No fanfare, no press release, just a simple title: The Angel Wing Project. Why We're Fighting. It opened on a black screen with quiet piano music playing beneath. Then Keanu's voice began, soft and steady. "My name is Keanu Reeves. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm not even a parent. But I've seen what happens when systems fail the people they're meant to protect." As he spoke, real faces faded in and out. Families holding framed photos. Parents speaking through tears. Footage of Rosa reading quietly in the hospital library at midnight. A candle burning beside Sophia's old journal. Then came the drawing, Cody's sketch of the nurse with angel wings. It filled the screen as Keanu's voice continued. This drawing was made by a little boy who never got the treatment he needed, but he believed someone would fight for him. We're here to make sure his belief wasn't in vain. The video ran just under 3 minutes, but it didn't need more time. It was raw, it was honest, it was unflinching. Within hours, it exploded across social media. Nurses across the country began posting with the hashtag #AngelWingPromise. Pediatric hospitals in small towns and major cities shared the video internally. Several anonymous donors pledged matching grants. Overnight, over $3 million poured into the Angel Wing Project Fund. But something else arrived too: threats. The next morning, Rosa received a package, no return address. Inside was a burned copy of one of her published papers, blackened around the edges. A single sticky note was attached: "Stop now, or more kids will die." Her hands went cold. That same day, a fake news article appeared online. It claimed Rosa had been reprimanded for falsifying charts years ago, that she'd been fired once before and had mental health issues that made her unfit to lead research. The article used doctored quotes, and the hospital's former administrator, recently hired by a pharmaceutical lobbying firm, was listed as a source. Keanu called Jody into his office. I want everything triple-checked. Security, legal protection, press response. We're not backing down. But we're not going to be reckless either." Jody nodded. "Already on it." Keanu then called Rosa. She answered on the third ring, her voice shaky. "Are you okay?" he asked. "No," she said honestly. "But I will be." He waited, giving her space. "Thank you," she added, "for not asking me to stop." "You don't have to thank me," Keanu said. "You're the one standing in the fire." "I'm just tired," Rosa whispered. "But I can't let them erase these kids. Not again." "You won't," he said. "We won't." Later that night, Keanu sat alone in his study, Cody's drawing resting beside a framed photo of his own sister from when she was a child. The weight of their stories pressed into him. He understood now. This wasn't just about medicine. It was about memory, about making sure the children they couldn't save still had voices, still had impact, still mattered. And he'd made a silent promise to every grieving parent in that meeting room. No matter what came next, they would not be forgotten. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Angel Wing project took place under a pale morning sky, with camera crews positioned along the temporary fence. Keanu and Rosa stood side by side, shovels in hand, as construction crews prepped the land. Supporters from across the country sent flowers and hand-painted signs. For a moment, hope outweighed fear. But within days, things started going wrong. First, a shipment of custom pediatric imaging equipment, donated by a nonprofit in Chicago, never arrived. The tracking number stopped updating after the truck left Nevada. Then, the city building inspector issued a surprise stop work order citing incomplete safety documentation, even though the project had already cleared every regulation. Then came the donor withdrawal. A major backer who had pledged over $1 million quietly backed out of the project without explanation. Keanu's foundation reached out, no reply. When Jody called his assistant, she received a single text message in response: "We've reconsidered. Please don't reach out again." Keanu and Rosa sat in the foundation conference room, staring at the whiteboard where timelines and budgets were slowly being erased with each disruption. "They're coming at us from every angle," Rosa said quietly. "They're scared," Keanu replied. "That's a good sign, but it also means they're not done." He called in his head of security, a former intelligence officer named Marcus. Keanu explained what was happening: the pattern of interference, the donor silence, the missing equipment. Marcus nodded and got to work. Within 72 hours, he returned with a file thick with evidence. He laid it out on the table in front of Keanu and Rosa. Wire transfers, anonymous shell companies, backdoor meetings, logged through license plate scans and internal access logs. "It's all coming from the same place," Marcus said. "Morris Kendall Biopharma." Rosa blinked. "They're the ones who lobbied against the treatment that could have saved Sophia." Keanu's jaw tensed. "They're trying to bury us before the foundation takes root." But they had leverage now. The very next day, Keanu contacted Ava Reed, an investigative journalist known for exposing medical corruption. He invited her to his office, where Marcus briefed her on what they'd found. Ava, stunned by the depth of it all, agreed to run a full expose in the Atlantic Weekly. But just as the article was being finalized, something else happened. A little girl named Lucy, only 6 years old, was rushed to the same hospital where Rosa used to work. Her symptoms mirrored those in Rosa's private case notes: neuromuscular spasms, heat intolerance, and sudden cognitive regression. The doctors were baffled. A nurse from the ward messaged Rosa in secret: "It's Sophia's profile, I swear it. They're treating her like it's an autoimmune reaction, but she's declining fast." Rosa immediately tried to visit. Security stopped her at the door. "You're not authorized," they said. "You no longer work here." "I don't need to work here," she argued. "I can help." The hospital administrator stepped in. "If you approach the patient's family, we'll consider it harassment. You are not welcome here, Ms. Delgado." Crushed but not defeated, Rosa returned to the foundation. Keanu was already waiting. "She's just a child," Rosa whispered. "And they're going to lose her, like they lost mine." Keanu's expression was calm, but his eyes burned with urgency. "We're not going to let that happen." Keanu picked up his phone and called the one person who might make a difference, the girl's mother. He'd gotten her contact through a quiet channel, a nurse who couldn't bear to watch another child slip through the cracks. The woman, named Melissa, answered on the first ring. At first, she didn't believe it was really Keanu Reeves. But once he spoke gently about her daughter, Lucy, and mentioned specific symptoms no one outside the hospital could have known, she fell silent. Then she began to cry. "Slipping away," Melissa whispered. "They won't tell me much. Just that they're monitoring her. But I can see it. I can see it in her eyes. I'm losing her." Keanu's voice didn't waver. "You don't have to. Not yet. I know someone who can help. But you'll need to trust me, and you'll need to move fast." Within hours, Melissa and Lucy were escorted to a secure back entrance at a Warner Brothers studio lot. Keanu had cleared a soundstage and transformed it into a sterile, mobile emergency care unit. Doctors from his foundation, hand-picked by Dr. Evelyn Hart, waited with full equipment. Rosa stood by, lab coat on, hands trembling. Melissa stepped into the bright space and paused. She locked eyes with Rosa. "You're the one," she said. "You're the one they won't let near her." Rosa nodded. "I know what's happening to your daughter. I've seen it before. I can't promise a miracle, but I can promise I won't stop trying." Lucy lay on a gurney, pale and barely conscious, her breathing shallow. Melissa hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Do what you need to." Rosa wasted no time. She moved with precision, guiding the team through a protocol she'd refined over the course of 5 agonizing years. Using a combination of anti-inflammatory infusions, targeted neurotransmitter stabilizers, and an oxygen saturation technique still considered unconventional by mainstream medicine. Corps Master, Agent Keanu stayed in the background, watching, not interfering, just present. For hours they worked. Rosa barely paused to breathe. Melissa sat in a chair beside her daughter, whispering songs and memories, tears running down her cheeks. And then, just past midnight, Lucy's eyes opened. Not a flicker, not a reflex. A clear, intentional opening of her eyes. She looked around, saw her mother, and whispered, "Mom?" Melissa screamed with relief and collapsed into sobs. Rosa's knees buckled slightly, but she caught herself. One of the younger doctors whispered, "That shouldn't be possible this fast." Keanu finally stepped forward. His voice was low. "He's going to be okay, right?" Rosa exhaled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "If the pattern holds, she'll stabilize. This was the window. We caught it." Keanu nodded slowly. "Then that changes everything." The very next morning, the expose hit the internet. Ava Reed's article exposed the full extent of the sabotage, complete with documents showing that Morris Kendall Biopharma had influenced local regulators and lobbied insurance companies to suppress alternative treatments. Social media exploded, but more importantly, so did support. Donations poured back in, 3 major donors reinstated their pledges. A petition to investigate the pharmaceutical lobby's role in pediatric treatment denial hit over 500,000 signatures in 24 hours. And in a quiet room on a studio lot, one little girl who almost slipped through the cracks didn't. Rosa stood in the mobile unit, her hands steady, her heart pounding. Cameras had been discreetly installed throughout the treatment area, not for publicity, but for documentation. At Keanu's request, a medical transparency team had agreed to observe and verify the process in real time. Their goal was simple: truth. Show the world what could be done if compassion outranked profit. Dr. Evelyn Hart arrived just before the final phase of the protocol. She stepped beside Rosa, reviewed the vitals, and nodded without a word. For the next 6 hours, the two women worked in quiet rhythm, adjusting treatments, monitoring responses, and keeping Lucy stable. Lucy's body responded faster than either of them expected. Oxygen levels improved, neurological reflexes began to return. It was a delicate dance. One wrong step and everything could unravel. But Rosa knew these steps by heart. She'd practiced them on paper, in silence, in heartbreak, ever since her daughter passed. Now, for the first time, they were saving someone. By dawn, Rosa gave the go-ahead. "We're ready," she whispered. Keanu's media team, already briefed on confidentiality and trauma sensitivity, began the live stream under careful terms. It wasn't sensational. It wasn't flashy. It was simply real. The world watched as Lucy's eyes opened again. She looked around, blinked, her breathing deepened. Her gaze settled on her mother. "Mom," she whispered. Melissa dropped to her knees beside the bed, sobbing into Lucy's chest. "You came back," she whispered. "You came back to me." Rosa stepped back. Her face was pale, eyes flooded with emotion, but she kept it together. Evelyn reached over and gently touched her arm. "You just saved her." And they saw it. Within hours, news outlets picked up the stream. The video of Lucy's recovery spread like wildfire. Hashtags began to trend across platforms. Pediatric neurologists across the country began requesting access to Rosa's protocol. Parents whose children had faced similar illnesses flooded the hotline Keanu's team had prepared. They didn't want miracles. They wanted answers. That same afternoon, Rosa stood at a press podium for the first time in her life. Keanu stood beside her, not in front. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. But Rosa ignored the noise. She held up a single photograph, a picture Lucy had drawn just before being hospitalized. It was a rough sketch of a nurse with long hair, holding a heart in her hand. "This is what healing looks like," Rosa said. "Not just medicine, not just treatment, but faith, love, and refusing to give up when you're told it's over." The applause was thunderous. When it quieted, Keanu stepped forward. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Reeves, what will you do if the pharmaceutical companies take legal action?" Keanu didn't hesitate. "Bring it." The silence that followed was more powerful than any speech. By nightfall, Rosa's name was on every major news outlet. Interviews were requested from every network. Medical institutions offered funding, research positions, even honorary titles. But Rosa turned most of it down. Instead, she drove alone, no cameras, no escorts, to a quiet hillside cemetery just outside the city. The night was cold. The stars blurred through her windshield. Her fingers gripped the wheel until her knuckles went white. She walked to a small grave marked with wildflowers and a toy stethoscope that had faded under the sun. Her daughter's name was carved into the stone, simple, gentle, forever young. Rosa knelt down and placed her hand on the ground. "You didn't die for nothing," she whispered. "I promise you. You didn't." She stayed at the grave for a long time, until the air turned sharp with cold and the cemetery lights flickered out. Her body trembled, not from the chill, but from the emotional weight of it all. Everything she had endured, the poverty, the judgment, the silence, had led here. But so had her daughter's laughter, the way she used to dance barefoot in the kitchen, her curious questions about the stars. As Rosa stood to leave, she felt lighter, as if a piece of her pain had been lifted. But that piece shattered the moment she reached her car. There, tucked beneath the windshield wiper, was a plain, white envelope. Rosa froze. Her eyes scanned the lot. Empty. Not a soul in sight. She looked back at the envelope, heart hammering. She opened it slowly. No money, no documents, just a single sheet of paper. Typed. Final warning. She read the words 3 times, her breath catching each time. No name, no signature. But it didn't need one. The message was crystal clear. Stop. or face consequences. For a moment, her knees buckled. She gripped the car door to steady herself. The weight of fear rushed in, dark and suffocating. It wasn't just her reputation or job anymore. This was personal. Someone was watching her, following her, and they didn't care who they hurt. Her first instinct was to run, go back to hiding, protect what little she had left. But then she remembered the girl's voice, Lucy's voice, whispering, "Mom," and the sound of Melissa sobbing in relief. She remembered the nurses who stood quietly in the back during her speech, tears in their eyes. The grieving parents who called her brave. Keanu's words, "Bring it." She folded the note and slid it into her coat pocket. And she started the engine. The next morning, she arrived at Keanu's Foundation headquarters earlier than expected. Security waved her through without question. Jody greeted her at the elevator and escorted her upstairs. Keanu was already in the conference room, standing over a whiteboard filled with diagrams and deadlines. He turned when she entered, reading her face before she said a word. "You got a message," he said. She nodded. "Under my windshield." He motioned for her to sit. "You okay?" "No," she admitted. "But I'm not quitting." Keanu nodded once, firmly. "Good." He handed her a folder marked Phase 2. Inside were blueprints, donor pledges, and a private security detail proposal. "We knew they'd fight," he said. "Now we show them we don't scare easy." Just then, Evelyn Hart entered with a laptop in hand. She pulled up an email from a prominent medical ethics board. They wanted to collaborate, publicly. Rosa was stunned. "We're no longer a whisper in the dark," Evelyn said. "They made you famous. Now we make it count." Rosa smiled through the exhaustion. "Let's do it." But deep inside, the warning still echoed. Every step forward meant more exposure, more danger. She knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Later that evening, she returned to the lab to check on Lucy's recovery logs. Her vitals were improving. Her brain scans showed stable progression. The data was undeniable. But so was the pressure mounting outside. As Rosa closed her laptop, she whispered, "If you're watching me, watch this." She reached for the intercom and called her team. "Everyone," she said, voice steady, "we're expanding the protocol. Starting now." Outside, a black sedan idled near the curb. Its engine never shut off. But inside, Rosa Delgado had just declared she wasn't afraid anymore. The next morning, Keanu sat in the dimly lit security room of his foundation, eyes fixed on a screen. Jody stood beside him, arms crossed, while his head of security, Mason, played a video. The footage showed a man in a navy suit stepping into a black car outside a lobbying firm in D.C. "That's him," Mason said. "Peter Langston, former insurance executive, current chairman of the American Pharmaceutical Lobbying Council." Keanu leaned in. "He's the one who denied Rosa's daughter's treatment?" "Confirmed," Mason replied. "He signed off on the rejections for experimental pediatric therapies, including the one Dr. Hart proposed. Rosa's case was one of many." Keanu's jaw tightened. "How many children?" Mason tapped the tablet. "We found at least 14 confirmed cases in the last 5 years where the same treatment was denied under similar language. Some of the families are willing to talk, others, not yet. Fear runs deep." Jody exhaled. "And now, he's funding smear campaigns, sabotaging permits, and threatening Rosa." "We traced 2 shell companies back to Langston's firm," Mason added. "One of them paid for the media ads questioning Rosa's credibility. Another was involved in blocking the construction materials for the Angel Wing Center." Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Get me everything, every document, every victim, every cent." Rosa entered the room a few moments later, holding a coffee cup with trembling hands. She'd barely slept, but the fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed. Keanu turned to her. "We found him." She looked at the paused video of Peter Langston on the screen. Her hands went cold. Her throat tightened. "That's him?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Mason confirmed. "And we have enough evidence to file with the Department of Justice?" Silence settled. The weight of the decision loomed large. "We can go public," Keanu continued. "But it won't be safe." Rosa looked down. Her fingers gripped the paper sleeve on the coffee cup. "If we push this," he said gently, "they'll come after you harder. Not just your job, your reputation, maybe more." Rosa didn't answer at first. She sat down, her mind swirling. All the fear, all the trauma. Every late night she'd spent crying in the dark, questioning herself, wondering if she had imagined the injustice. But it was real. All of it. And it had faces now, names, data. She pulled something from her purse, a folded piece of paper. The drawing the grieving mother had given her of the winged nurse. She placed it on the table between them. "I promised her," Rosa whispered. "And I promised my daughter. No more silence." Keanu nodded once. "We go all the way?" Her voice didn't shake this time. "All the way." They got to work. Keanu's legal team compiled the evidence into a sealed report for the Department of Justice. Jody coordinated with journalists, preparing a controlled media release once the case was filed. Rosa reviewed every name on the victim list. She called 3 of the parents herself, asking for permission to include their stories. Most said yes. By nightfall, the report was ready, and the world was about to change. But before the official filing, Keanu made one more move, an appearance on national television. That evening, he sat across from a well-known late-night host, the cameras rolling, the audience buzzing with anticipation. The host leaned in. "Keanu, everyone's talking about the Angel Wing project. It's beautiful and powerful, but we heard there's more behind it, something darker. Is that true?" Keanu paused. Then he looked directly into the lens. "There are people in this country," Keanu began, "who look at a child in pain and see a spreadsheet. They make decisions based on numbers, not names. Some of those decisions cost lives." The audience went silent. Even the host leaned back, visibly moved. "I met someone," Keanu continued, "a nurse. Her name is Rosa Delgado. She lost her daughter because of a system that values profit over compassion. Instead of breaking, she built something, a model for care that could save lives, real lives." He didn't say Langston's name, but the message was unmistakable. "And when we tried to share it with the world," Keanu added, "the world pushed back, hard. Smear campaigns, threats, delays, sabotage. But you know what that means. It means they're scared. It means she's right." The studio erupted into applause, but Keanu didn't smile. He waited until the noise faded. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about children who didn't get a chance, about families still grieving in silence, and about the people who refuse to stop fighting." That clip would later go viral. By the next morning, Angel Wing trended on every platform. But behind the scenes, the real battle was only beginning. Back at the foundation, Rosa reviewed the final draft of the DOJ filing. The evidence against Langston was overwhelming. Internal emails showing deliberate rejections of critical treatments, buried medical reports, and targeted efforts to suppress alternatives like hers. Still, as she read, Rosa felt her heart beat faster. She wasn't just signing her name to a report. She was stepping into a fire. Keanu noticed her hesitation and walked over. "We don't have to do this today." Rosa shook her head. "No, we do." She signed the last page with steady hands. Just as she did, Jody rushed in, holding a printed news alert. "Keanu, Rosa," he's responded. She handed the paper over. A bold headline stretched across the top. Pharma exec denies allegations, accuses Keanu Reeves of celebrity manipulation. Below it, Langston's statement read, "This is a coordinated media attack from an actor with a political agenda, exploiting grief to promote unverified science. We will defend the integrity of our industry against this harmful smear." Keanu let out a slow breath. Rosa read the statement twice. "He's already spinning it." Keanu folded the paper. "Then let's give them something they can't spin." That night, Rosa visited the Angel Wing Center one last time before the DOJ filing went public. In the quiet hallway, she paused before the wall of drawings sent by children. Right in the center was her daughter's, faded but still bright. The nurse with angel wings. She traced it with her finger, whispering, "We go all the way." Outside, Keanu waited in the car, watching her through the glass. When she finally walked out, he didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The war had just become public. But now, they were ready. Together, the hearing room was packed. Cameras lined the walls, reporters whispered into microphones, and a crowd of grieving parents, doctors, and citizens filled every seat and aisle. It wasn't just another political event. It was being called the trial of the century. Rosa sat beside her attorney at the long witness table. Keanu sat a few chairs down, flanked by Jody and Dr. Hart. The air was tense with anticipation as the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions prepared to begin the session. The lead senator struck the gavel. "This hearing is now in session." First to testify were the families. One by one, mothers and fathers stood before the microphone. Each held a photo, a drawing, or a folded piece of clothing. They spoke about their children, their laughter, their courage, their final days. They talked about the battles with insurance companies, the denials, the delays, the cold letters citing experimental status as the reason their child could not receive the treatment they needed. Some broke down mid-sentence. Others stared ahead, their grief steady and fierce. Every story added another layer to the truth everyone in the room already knew, but had never dared to confront in public. Then it was Rosa's turn. She took the stand with shaking hands. In front of her lay her weathered notebook, the same one she'd filled by flashlight during night shifts and at bus stops in the rain. She looked out across the room and said, "I'm not a scientist by title. I'm a nurse. My research wasn't born in a lab. It was born at the bedside of children who were dying." She opened the notebook and read from her notes, not in clinical jargon, but in simple, human language. She described what she saw, the patterns, the correlations, the small miracles that emerged when she adjusted care in ways no textbook had suggested. She explained how her protocol had shown signs of working in 3 separate cases, including her own daughter. Levy says, "Including her own daughter," and then she said the words that cracked the room open. "My daughter died because someone in a suit decided her life wasn't worth the risk." The room went silent. Not a cough, not a whisper. Rosa looked directly at the senators. "I'm not asking you to punish anyone. I'm asking you to stop this from happening again." From the corner of the room, Keanu lowered his head. Dr. Evelyn Hart stepped forward next. Her presence carried weight. She didn't need theatrics. Just her name alone commanded respect across the medical community. She adjusted her glasses, placed a large binder on the desk, and calmly began. "This," she said, tapping the binder, "is the data from Rosa Delgado's treatment model, independently verified, peer-reviewed, and replicated under controlled conditions," adding, "This is how..." She turned to the senators. "What we have here is not just an alternative, it is a breakthrough." Charts were displayed. Response rates, recovery times, comparisons against existing pharmaceutical treatments. The numbers were staggering. One senator leaned forward and asked, "Why hasn't this been adopted?" Dr. Hart didn't blink. "Because it isn't profitable. There is no drug patent, no exclusivity clause, just care." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Next came the whistleblowers. An insurance executive, face blurred and voice altered for protection, submitted internal emails to the committee. One of them read, "Deny the claim." It's cheaper to settle a lawsuit than pay for unapproved treatment. A second whistleblower came forward, this time on camera. She was a former claims manager who had processed Rosa's daughter's denial. "I still remember that file," she said, her voice shaking. "We were told to flag any outlier requests, especially if they involved experimental care. The system was designed to delay until parents gave up or the child passed." The committee chair turned red with fury. "You mean to tell us this was a deliberate strategy?" "Yes," she said. "And it wasn't just Rosa, it was hundreds." Then the doors opened. The final witness walked in, a silver-haled man in a crisp suit. The former executive who had once denied Rosa's daughter's treatment. Now, the head of a powerful pharmaceutical lobbying group. He'd been subpoenaed the night before, after evidence linked him to the threats, payments, and campaign of sabotage. He took the oath and sat down. "What do you have to say for yourself?" the senator demanded. At first, he denied everything. Then came the questioning. Document after document was shown. His signature, his emails, the financial trail that led from his firm to fake studies discrediting Rosa's work. Under mounting pressure, his composure cracked. He leaned toward the microphone and said, "We did what we thought was necessary to protect the industry." "And what about the children?" a senator shot back. There was silence. The executive stared ahead, hollow-eyed. "We failed them." It was the first honest thing he had said. The hearing's outcome was immediate. News outlets ran the headline across every platform: "Profit over children. Truth exposed." The pharmaceutical company's stock plummeted. Protesters gathered outside their headquarters within hours. The Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation. Keanu and Rosa sat side by side as the committee issued its final statements. One senator turned to Keanu and said, "You started all of this with one act of decency." But Keanu shook his head. "I just stopped to notice someone in the rain. She did the rest." Rosa looked down at her hands, tears slipping down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the weight of finally being heard. Within a week, Congress introduced and passed the Pediatric Research Protection and Transparency Act. It included emergency reforms, ensuring that no child could be denied experimental treatment if supported by peer-reviewed research and a qualified medical team. It also allocated federal funds to support nonprofit-led pediatric trials, free from corporate influence. The pharmaceutical company's CEO was arrested after forensic auditors uncovered falsified clinical data, slush funds, and a conspiracy to suppress alternative treatments. And across the country, hospitals began reviewing denied claims. Some reopened closed cases, others quietly issued letters of apology. But for Rosa, the most powerful moment came in private. That night, after the hearing, she walked into her daughter's room, untouched since the day she died, and lit a candle beneath the drawing. The winged nurse still smiled from the page. Rosa whispered, "We did it, mi amor. We made them see you." And across the country, thousands of mothers and fathers who had lost children saw her story and finally felt something that had eluded them for so long. They felt hope. The air in Los Angeles carried a quiet charge that morning, as if the city itself understood what was about to happen. The Angel Wing Pediatric Research Center was finally opening its doors. What had once been a contested dream, attacked from every direction, now stood as a gleaming, living testament to resilience, compassion, and courage. A line of families stretched around the block. Some were dressed in bright colors. Others held framed pictures of children they had lost, and many held the hands of those they were lucky enough to still have, children who had survived because of one woman's relentless love and one man's choice to stop and care. Inside, the energy was electric. Doctors in white coats moved with pride. Volunteers from around the world greeted families in multiple languages. The walls were decorated with art created by children treated through Rosa's protocols. One section featured hundreds of hand-drawn angel wings. Each one carried a name that once might have been lost, Rosa stood in the lobby, wearing a soft cream suit and holding her daughter's necklace tightly in her palm. Her eyes scanned the atrium slowly, absorbing the miracle before her. Behind her, Dr. Evelyn Hart stood proudly, watching Rosa in silence for a moment before stepping forward. "She'd be so proud of you," Evelyn said gently. Rosa turned to her, her voice barely a whisper. "She's here. I feel her." Outside, a small brass band began playing as guests started gathering for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Media vans had arrived, but they were kept at a respectful distance. This wasn't about press. It was about healing, about memory, about the future. Keanu arrived quietly, dressed in a black suit, his expression solemn but warm. He didn't head to the front where the spotlight waited. He slipped through the side entrance, preferring to stand among the crowd rather than above it. A few people recognized him, but no one dared disturb him. It wasn't a Hollywood moment. It was something far deeper. The ceremony began with a short speech by Dr. Hart, who recounted the difficult path that had led to this moment. She spoke of Rosa's daughter, of the children they had lost, and the children they had saved. Then came a series of brief remarks from families who had been helped by the experimental treatments now becoming standard practice under the Angel Wing banner. One mother, holding her 4-year-old son on her hip, looked directly at Rosa and said through tears, "You brought my baby back to me. I will never forget that." Rosa took the podium last. She hesitated, visibly shaken by emotion, but the crowd fell silent and supportive. "I once thought I had lost my purpose the night my daughter died," she began. "But what I didn't realize was that she had left me with a mission, not just to fight for her, but to fight for every child like her. This place is not a miracle. It's a promise that we see you, that we believe in you, that no child's life is worth less than a line in a ledger." Tears flowed freely in the audience. Even those who had come out of curiosity now stood with hands clasped or arms wrapped around loved ones, listening with open hearts. As Rosa stepped down from the podium, the crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation. It wasn't the kind of applause one hears at a performance. It was the kind born of gratitude, of shared sorrow, of shared hope. The next part of the ceremony led everyone outside to the garden, where the heart of the Angel Wing Center had been carefully built. It was not just a place of beauty, it was a sanctuary. The garden had been planted with lavender, jasmine, and white roses, all chosen for their calming scent and symbolic meaning. Butterflies hovered over the blossoms as if nature itself had been invited to participate. At the center of the garden stood the statue. It was bronze, larger than life, yet delicate in its emotion. A nurse held a small child in her arms, her face turned downward with a look of quiet strength. Behind her, sweeping wings curved upward into the air, each feather detailed by hand. But the most breathtaking part was how the light hit it. As the sun moved overhead, the wings cast a long shadow, one that stretched across the marble path leading to the building's front doors. That shadow, in the shape of wings, became the symbol of the entire project, a reminder that protection doesn't always come with sound or spectacle. Sometimes it arrives silently, with dignity. As families gathered around the statue, Rosa stepped forward, holding a small hand-carved box. She opened it, revealing a pendant, her daughter's necklace. Carefully, she placed it in a slot at the base of the statue, where it would remain permanently sealed. A small engraved plate was mounted beneath it. It read, "Alma, you gave me wings." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and even the staff members who had worked tirelessly on the center found themselves wiping their eyes. Keanu moved forward then, standing beside Rosa. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Rosa turned, looked at him, and hugged him tightly. "You saw me when no one else did," she whispered, her voice trembling. Keanu returned the hug gently, replying, "I see you now." It was a simple exchange, but in that moment, It carried the weight of every trial, every night of grief, every sleepless shift, and every child's life that now had a future. Children were the first to break the emotional stillness. Several of them, once patients, now survivors, broke into a spontaneous game of tag. Laughter rang out. Rosa turned and watched as a little boy tripped and fell, only to be caught mid-fall by a nurse who lifted him up with a laugh of her own. The boy reached out and touched the statue's base, resting his hand on the words. A journalist nearby quietly asked Keanu for a quote. He paused before speaking. "I didn't build this," he said. "I just stopped my car one night and saw a woman in the rain. That moment changed everything. She did the rest." The simplicity of the statement struck the reporter speechless. Dr. Hart approached from behind, slipping a photo into Rosa's hand. It was one taken from the day the little girl had survived in the mobile lab. The child was smiling wide, sitting in Rosa's lap with a lollipop in her hand. Behind them, in the background, Keanu stood leaning against a doorway, arms folded, watching. "Your daughter's legacy is in every one of them," Dr. Hart said quietly. Rosa closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed. Then she smiled, not the smile of relief, but the kind that comes when something finally feels whole. The sun was beginning to set. Shadows lengthened across the courtyard. The bronze wings now painted the building in golden light. People began taking quiet walks through the garden. Keanu and Rosa stood near the statue, just watching. Neither of them spoke again. They didn't need to. A full year had passed since the Angel Wing Center opened its doors, and every morning, just after sunrise, Rosa walked the garden path alone before the world stirred awake. It had become her ritual, a quiet moment before the day's work, before meetings and rounds and difficult decisions. This time was hers, a space to reflect, to remember, and to witness what had once only existed in her dreams. The garden had bloomed beyond expectation. The trees were fuller now. The white roses had climbed higher on the trellises. Birds nested in the hedges, and at the heart of it all, the bronze statue still stood tall. Children continued to leave flowers or drawings near its base. Parents often sat beside it, speaking softly to names they had once feared would vanish into silence. But they hadn't. Not anymore. The Angel Wing Center had become more than a symbol. It had become a movement. Hundreds of children had come through its doors in the past 12 months. Some traveled across the country. Others were flown in from underserved communities. Many were referred by doctors who had once been skeptics of Rosa's protocol, but now praised it as revolutionary. Cases once labeled hopeless were being rewritten, child by child, chart by chart. And through it all, Rosa stood at the helm. Not for recognition, but because she had promised her daughter she would. Policy had changed too. Pediatric care guidelines were updated by federal boards after the Senate hearings. A new bill bearing the name Alma's Act passed into law, mandating insurance coverage for innovative, life-saving treatments in critical pediatric cases. For the first time in decades, progress was no longer a boardroom decision. It was a human one. Inside the center, photos lined the walls. Each child saved had a nameplate beneath their smiling portrait. On one newly added panel, Rosa had insisted on listing not just the names of those who lived, but also those who didn't. A plaque beside it read, "Because of them, others still have a chance." The public had embraced the story. But Keanu Reeves never stood in the spotlight. His involvement remained quiet, deliberate, and humble. He continued to fund the center's satellite clinics, quietly signing over royalties and rights from projects unrelated to the work. When asked in an interview why he kept doing it, he simply said, "Because it matters." That answer, though simple, echoed far and wide. Rosa had once feared the center would collapse under pressure, but something stronger had taken root. A network of caregivers had begun replicating the Angel Wing model in other states. Nurses who had once doubted her now called for advice. Dr. Hart was in talks with a university to build a dedicated training program based on Rosa's protocols. And every week, Rosa received at least one letter from a parent who had seen the viral video, thanking her for holding on, for not giving up. Some days, those letters were what got her through. And then there were the children, running down the halls, laughing in the therapy gardens, holding onto their IV poles like racing flags. They were loud, chaotic, full of life. Exactly what this place had been built to protect. But no matter how far they had come, Rosa still carried one ache. She returned to the statue that morning, just as a soft breeze rustled the rose petals. She reached out and placed her hand against the cold bronze. Her daughter's necklace, sealed at the base, shimmered faintly in the early light. "I hope you're proud," she whispered. Behind her, the center slowly began to stir, but for now she stayed still. Inside the building, Keanu stood by the observation window, overlooking the main treatment floor. He didn't announce his visits. He never asked for a tour. But every few weeks he came, just to watch, just to see what had become of that night at the bus stop. Today, he watched a boy in a hospital gown, maybe 7 or 8 years old, who had once been wheelchair-bound. He was walking now, slowly, with cautious steps, but smiling the whole way. A nurse knelt beside him, cheering him on. His mother wiped away tears in the background. Keanu didn't interrupt the moment. He just placed a hand against the glass, silent and still. Dr. Hart approached quietly. He respected Keanu's space. But today, he spoke. "We've had a 90% recovery rate in the last 3 months," he said. "The protocols are working even better than we predicted." Keanu nodded. "It's Rosa. She never stops." "Neither do you," Dr. Hart replied. Keanu didn't respond right away. He kept watching the little boy reach the end of the hallway and throw his arms around the nurse. Finally, he said, "It's not about me. I just happened to look out a window." Dr. Hart gave a quiet smile. "Sometimes, that's all it takes." Keanu turned toward the exit. Before leaving, he stopped at the dedication wall, where both of their names were listed under founding contributors. He ran his fingers across the etched letters, then pulled a folded paper from his pocket. A crayon drawing mailed from a girl in Arizona who called Rosa her hero. He placed the drawing at the base of the wall, next to the others. Before stepping outside, he looked back one more time. The center was alive, the garden swayed in the breeze, and the children laughed like music through the air. He didn't need thanks. This was enough. Later that evening, Rosa returned to the garden alone. The lights along the path glowed softly. She sat on the bench beneath the angel statue and looked at the engraved wall nearby. She whispered her daughter's name. Then she smiled. Dozens of names followed now, children still alive because of a moment that might have been missed. The final voice asks, "Have you ever seen someone others ignored and chosen to care? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe every child deserves a chance, share this incredible story, because one act of attention can change everything."